This is MakerGalaxy.
We're always talking about the future of design, the future of technology, the future of making. In a world where sleep management systems can learn when to wake us at the optimal time. A world where smart lighting systems can sync in real time with films to make a living room part of an immersive film experience. How do we find the next big thing? MakerGalaxy is a show that explores the crossroads of design, technology, and the future of making. Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm your host, Simon Martin, and this week we talked to Jordan Edelson, CEO of the mobile app design and development company Appetizer. Appetizer has worked with everybody from the NBA to various retail chains and celebrities to bring immersive mobile experiences to a variety of platforms and is now entering the arena of developing new experiences for wearable hardware. We'll talk with Jordan about everything from how he got his start developing software when he was in middle school, how his products ended up in Apple advertisements worldwide, to where he thinks the direction of wearables is going in the next 5 years, and more. Today's episode is brought to you by the Objet 500 Connects 3 from Stratasys, the world's only color and multi-material 3D printer. Offering incomparably brilliant and consistent colors, plus transparent colors, the Objet 500 Connects 3 lets you create the most true-to-life modeling possible. Find out more at stratasys.com. Welcome, Jordan. We'll get into Appetizer and Wearables in a little bit, but before we do, we want to know, where can we find the best donuts on earth, and what kind of donut should we get there?
That is a very good question. Well, my favorite donut is a glazed donut, but I haven't had a donut in many, many years, so I couldn't really tell you.
Are you just not doing the donut thing these days then?
No, I'm doing more of the low-carb thing.
I'm with you. So let's start from the beginning. Who are you, Jordan, and can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started developing apps?
Sure. So I've been, from a very early age, always passionate and enthusiastic about technology. I actually started some of my first technology companies when I was actually in high school. More specifically, though, it was more on creating flyers and brochures and stuff like that. And I was also very much into video gaming. I created my first video game that I built myself. Actually, when I was in high school, I had a team of about 20 different designers and developers, animators, sprite artists, sound engineers that all worked for me when I was in high school, and we built modifications of the Half-Life engine. And basically, we just took an existing game engine, we modded it by making different changes to the source code and the different models, and we created different games from that. So that's kind of where I got my start as far as managing a pretty big team, and then from there kind of further being more interested into the gaming space. I wanted to find other ways to monetize it. I created a company called Esports TV and Esports TV and Game Broadcasting Live, and those companies that I put together actually broadcasted video game tournaments. So what now is today Twitch, which has taken off and become very big. We were doing this at this point about 7+ years ago. And it was a really cool endeavor. We were broadcasting, doing play-by-play commentary for professional esports competitions. We were partnered with Samsung, all traveling all around the country. The pinnacle of that company is where we broadcasted a video game tournament in Times Square, and we put it up on the Jumbotrons that we were leveraging with MTV. Very cool property. We had a lot of fun with that. I exited that business and I moved on, and I became the chief technology officer of a publicly traded hip-hop company. And basically that company opened up hip-hop themed restaurants. And we built one in Miami and another one in Tampa. And the cool thing about those restaurants is that they had video games integrated into them. And we did partnerships with Microsoft and Viacom. And pretty much when you walked into these venues, they had hip-hop music going, food, and the Xboxes would be there. So while you're waiting for your food, you could play. And then at night, it flipped into a nightclub. Or again, same thing, you could play the games, you could dance. There was a recording studio. Very cool concept. A lot of celebrities were involved in it. I had about a 3.5 to 4 year run there with the business. Again, it's their CTO. And at that point, then exited and moved into Appetizer Mobile. So what Appetizer Mobile is today, Appetizer Mobile is a mobile digital agency based here in New York City. We've built over 150 mobile apps to date. We have a lot of different disciplines, everything from creating a very high-end UI and UX all the way through the actual launch and execution of the apps themselves. So again, it's a full-service agency. We've been featured on a lot of different publications and news articles over the last couple of years. Probably our most well-known application was the Intro to Math and Intro to Letters apps created by Montessorium. We were the developers behind those apps, and during the time we built those applications, Steve Jobs reached out to us and commended us on the work we were doing and actually gave us 2 iPad TV commercials that featured the work in those commercials. One of the commercials was iPad Electric, and the other one, I don't recall the name of it at the moment, but it was another one. And then from there, Apple just took a liking to the work we produced. They gave us billboard advertisements across the entire globe. So if you're driving over the 59th Street Bridge or anywhere in the city, you basically saw a big iPad that had what our app was inside of it. It was like a letter Z that a child would trace. So it was featured in that. If you went into any of the Apple stores around the world, our apps were preloaded on the iPhone 4Ss a while back. And again, it's about 4 years back, or about 3.5 to 4 years back. And we were also on the front of Apple.com as well. I think it was for their billions download, that we were on there for. So we got a lot of good press on that end. But our company, we do more than just educational apps. We do apps throughout the entire sector, full gambit. We do health applications. We do nightlife and hospitality apps. We do apps for different games, multiplayer games, single-player games, security applications. You name it, we've done something in that space. So that's, again, a big sector of our business. And then the other piece to it is we have a lab also as part of our company where we create our own in-house properties that we build, and then we market and sell from there.
Well, that is an amazing story of your career to date. But let's back up for just a second here. And can you tell us more about your first experience of, was it the video game or was it an app that you made first? I mean, when was your initial moment of launching into software development, and where did all this come from?
So, I was all self-taught, pretty much, probably I'd say in middle school is when it all started for me. But I was all self-taught. I bought a ton of different books. I think it all started with learning Visual Basic, but I was a self-taught programmer, but actually transitioned even more out of programming, and it was more in a role of just managing all the different departments, but within the game development business that I had years ago. And it's kind of funny, I've come back now to doing more and more games, but now instead of being built for the PC, now they're being built for mobile. But at that point in time, my passion was games themselves, and I wanted to find a way to being an entrepreneur and having that entrepreneurial spirit. I wanted to find a way to monetize it and make some money off it instead of just playing games till 3 or 4 in the morning. So again, the idea was to create a video game of our own. And, I produced a couple at that point. And it was also funny, too, is back also around that time, I did try building, and I built one game, which was for actually a PDA device. This was back before smartphones. This was when U.S. Robotics and actually owned Palm, and I actually created a game for that years and years ago, and that was distributed worldwide on different CDs, and people had to download it off the CD and sync it to their phone. And but again, that was it's just interesting how it's all kind of come back, and now I'm back into this business. But really what happened is just through the experience and the people and the networking I've had, I've made a lot of great relationships, and a lot of those relationships came back to me, knew that I had a background in developing different forms of software, and asked me if I could build an application. And the first example of that was after I left the hip hop company. It was a contact over at the NBA that reached out to me, and they wanted us to do some sort of small little app. Now, again, this was in the infancy, really, of the App Store. There were fart apps and just some basic apps in there. But the NBA wanted a basketball app where you can bounce a ball, and we ultimately came up with the idea of doing little mini bobbleheads. So with the NBA, we did a partnership with them, and we created over 40 different little mini bobbleheads for iPhone and also for Android, and they got a ton of press, and those were really cool. So that's kind of where it's really all started. And again, the NBA, still to this day, they were our first kind of major client that kicked us off.
Awesome. And you brought up an interesting point earlier in your answer where you were talking about the PDA. So with that, apps are getting smarter and the hardware that drives the apps are getting more powerful. So how have you been able to stay ahead of the game as new hardware comes out? And how do you just continually adapt yourself as we move into a future of wearables?
Sure. So, again, it has to be an understanding of, again, technology in general. I've always been, a gadget guy. I could figure something out real quick. I would just be able to kind of get into that piece of technology, understand it, understand how it's programmed. So having that kind of deep level of understanding about technology and how it's applicable to the world has really kind of helped us. And again, even my background, and I went to SUNY Albany. I studied business, communications, and sociology. So I found that kind of those three different sections really kind of helped me quite a bit in my ability to kind of connect all those different pieces together. So again, with technology and hardware, moving forward, still about having vision and kind of seeing where things are going to be able to connect those different dots. And again, that's typically a lot of times when our clients come to us, they look to us to be able to create those different connections because they don't typically live it and breathe it. Us, myself, and my company, my employees, we all pretty much live and breathe this technology. It's something we're passionate about, and it's something that we can adapt to very quickly, and we can understand how it's going to be used. We can also understand, what's going to be hot and what's just not going to take off. And we've been very fortunate that we're able to predict a lot of these, trends to date. And again, if you ask me where we're going to be 10, 15 years in the future, I definitely have some thoughts on that, as well. But definitely with wearables, it is the future. It is now. It's starting to happen. We're in the infancy of it. But where it's going to be 5 years from now, it's going to be completely different than just having a watch on your wrist.
Right. So how do you think the wearable movement is going to change app design and development and how us as humans interact with our hardware?
Well, specifically from a developer standpoint, just like there's multiple screens. First, obviously, you have the phone, then you have the different tablets. Obviously, you still have, television. You look at the push from Google and even from Apple. They're trying to really create these connected experiences with all these different screens. So from a developer standpoint, our apps need to be able to live on all these different screens, not just replicate data, but all kind of have their own unique purpose because there's a difference in how a phone is used as opposed to a watch. Just different use cases. So understanding those different use cases, really help a lot from a developer standpoint. And designing specifically for each platform, helps as well. And it's going to continue to change. But I think one kind of common thread is that all these devices are going to be connected and they're going to be speaking to each other. And they're all going to be collecting a lot of data on you and hopefully making your life simpler and better.
Well, on that note, do you think that wearables are really actually going to be practical? I've heard arguments where people are saying it's just going to be too much of a disconnect overall. As somebody who has been developing apps for smartphones, what would you have to say about that?
Well, I would take a look first at, for example, Google Glass. I've been part of our Explorer program for the last year and a half. I was one of the earlier people that was part of that program. And honestly, it was very cool. I tried it out, for about a month or so. And then honestly, I couldn't wear it anymore. The hardware just, wasn't up to spec. The battery wasn't that great. And eventually I just didn't really care for having something kind of hovering right over, my eye. It was just, it interfered too much. And from the behavioral standpoint, I just couldn't really wrap my head around it, constantly charging the device and stuff like that. It just didn't fit into my lifestyle. There was too much friction involved. But moving forward, you're definitely going to see, more in the line of watches. Watches will be a better interface. I still think it's going to take some time. Obviously, the easiest way for wearables and some of these smartwatches to get in there was to really focus on fitness, because that's something that people are used to doing now. They'll have usually carry like a stopwatch, or for many years when you have a stopwatch, they have other different devices. But I mean, moving forward now, people are used to having some sort of additional device, whether it be an iPod or something that goes along with them. So from the behavioral standpoint, it's easier for fitness to be kind of the entry point. But moving forward, you're going to see a lot of other data that'll be captured, other type of devices. I don't know if the final form factors are really going to be just a watch. It might be more of a gauntlet. It might be just something else that just is more of a bracelet that kind of sits on your hand, maybe larger real estate. Again, it might even be, a contact lens. Right now these are all wearables, but I think where it's going, eventually you'll have something that's more of a embeddable, or something that's even implantable, that actually will fit in your skin, believe it or not. And again, it might sound crazy right now, but give it 10, 15 years, you might start to see that as well, where people are actually implanting these different devices in them to collect different types of information. But again, I think a lot of it's still going to stem from health and fitness first, and then it'll penetrate into other areas. So being able to use the watches, for games, be able to use the watches for navigation, other things outside of just fitness and health.
Definitely. And on the note of the embeddable hardware, I saw just the other day there's a tattoo that you can use to unlock your phone. It's a new concept, so it's already happening. Even if it's not hardware, it's ink that you're embedding into your wrist that still carries some pretty powerful information. So when you were talking about Google Glass, some people have argued that there is still too much of a disconnect between the virtual and the real. The disconnect means that you're paying attention to one or the other, but never both, in the sense of augmented reality. So how do you think that hardware and apps can better bridge this divide as we move into this future of wearables?
Yeah, no, I do agree with that. We build a lot of augmented reality apps. A lot of the augmented reality apps we deal with are usually in the form of for navigation purposes, or even games that we're producing. So it really depends. Again, the ultimate use case for it. But I think again, you're seeing companies like Samsung, they're actually in talks with like Oculus, to be able to create a VR experience that actually hooks up to the phone. But at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to wear this thing, obviously, when you're driving a car or anything like that. And you're right, there is, it could be seen also as a distraction with all these different overlays, on top. I think, from an app developer standpoint, I think what's going to help, these different devices is kind of prioritizing the information that's displayed. So again, simply kind of pushing out, every simple, push notification that you get, over, a display, whether it's on your, watch or Google Glass, that's not going to help. Because again, you're going to get tired of it. You're going to turn off the notifications, because you don't want to be blinded by all this info. But I think having more of an intelligent system that can prioritize what you're actually seeing and what's relevant at that certain time is really going to be key. Now, I know Google now is kind of like they're tested this, displaying different cards and things like that it feels that are prioritized. And again, it's not great because sometimes I'll see like a UPS package that I picked up like 3 days ago that's still on there. But I feel like as the systems get smarter, as there's more information kind of gathered, and as your kind of virtual profile is being built, and then links into, this priority list of what's being sent to your different devices, I think that's going to help that aspect of it. Now, also, again, there'll be certain more relevant information that, would probably be better to come through, the Google Glass versus the watch, and vice versa. So I think, again, that priority based on what device you're looking at is also going to be, very useful to kind of help fix some of those issues.
Very interesting. And now, when we talk about wearables and the future of wearables, it's pretty hard to avoid talking about that without talking about how Apple is going to be stepping into the game with the rumored iWatch. So now that we have a better idea of the practicality of wearables, I have two questions for you. First, do you think that there will even be an iWatch in the near future? And if so, how can Apple win the wearable game from both a hardware and software stance?
Yeah, so, it's been rumored for a while. They're going to have to do something to kind of play in that space. My one big fear, though, is that I hope it's just not a regurgitation of what's out there, just kind of branded and marketed Apple's way. I think, Apple they definitely lost, a lot of innovation, when Steve Jobs, passed away. But hopefully they can kind of pull it together, as I know they do have a lot of billion people over there, as well. So we'll just have to kind of see and wait. Obviously, it's all rumors and speculation. I know there's a lot of talks about other unique sensors and other use cases that they're trying to use it for. So hopefully Apple will be the ones that can kind of take us out of this kind of health and fitness only kind of mode around these different devices and its usefulness, and bring us into even more practical applications, for it. And obviously, it's not going to be all on them. Obviously, they're the hardware, a developer behind it. It will still come down, to developers to create that innovation. But again, hopefully Apple will kind of lead the way and show us some of the things that can be done, and give us the tools, to do it. So again, it's still kind of, up in the air at this moment.
Awesome. And so ultimately, as somebody who is so heavily involved in the world of app design, what do you think the future of apps and wearables looks like, even beyond this 5-year scope? I mean, we're not going to go into all end up like the humans in WALL-E, are we?
Well, we don't know. I mean, anything, of course, can happen. But end of the day, there's still going to be software. I mean, at its core, there's still going to be software that's going to, run these devices. Again, whether it be, something with glasses, even something with a contact lens, doesn't matter how small it gets, there's going to have to be some sort of directive, for that, some sort of program. I do feel like, though, a lot of it's going to be driven by AI in the future, especially with all these different devices that are going to, be out there, all the different smartwatches. There's going to be a lot of data that's going to be captured, a lot of information that the average human or groups of humans, we just won't have the bandwidth to be able to process all that data. So again, when you get into big data like that, there's going to have to be some AI-based, solutions that are going to have to be able to analyze the data, learn from it, adapt from it, and make additional suggestions, but not just simply regurgitate, what it's programmed to do, but actually really get into, deep kind of machine-based learning and understand it and make those connections for you. That's really when things are going to get, very wild. But there'll still be, a number of different interfaces to capture that information. How far it goes, we'll just have to see. And obviously, with all this comes, a lot of security-based risks, and it could be a very scary future as well, depending upon, where this all goes and how it tracks. But now is the time to be thinking about that. But ultimately, I do think it will be in the hands of AI connecting all these devices, together.
Very insightful answer. And one last question for you, Jordan. As an accomplished software developer and app designer who has successfully launched numerous products and businesses, what is one piece of advice you can give our listeners who might be struggling to get their own app or product design out there?
Yeah, so I mean, like I would tell really any entrepreneur, because again, when you go in to build apps, you're not doing it as a hobby, you're really building it as a business, and that is the position our company takes, that whether it be a big startup or Fortune 500, or they're a small startup or a big Fortune 500 company, it's the same kind of message. You want to kind of stick with it. You want to treat it as a business. You want to do things, the right way. Understand, especially if you're an entrepreneur, that there will be a lot of ups and downs, just like with any business. App development is not any different. And then again, when you get into the actual development of it, you have to be agile. You need to be flexible. You need to be open-minded, and you really need to listen, to your customer and understand, why you're designing and developing this in the first place. And the big issue, with when we develop apps, is people try to come in, they tell us they want to do everything under the sun in their app, and that's completely the wrong strategy. You really want to focus on just a couple core key features initially and do those really, really well, and then scale from there. And that's really the trick to success with building apps.
Excellent answer and very good advice. Well, Jordan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Today's episode was brought to you by the Objet 500 Connects 3 from Stratasys, the world's only color and multi-material 3D printer, offering incomparably brilliant and consistent colors, plus transparent colors. The Objet 500 Connects 3 lets you create the most true-to-life modeling possible. Find out more at stratasys.com. Thanks for checking us out today, and if you'd like to find out more about Jordan and his approach to app design and development, be sure to head over to appetizermobile.com. On our next episode, we'll be talking with Thiago da Costa, founder of the cloud-based 3D design and publishing tool Lagoa. I'm your host, Simon Martin. Stay tuned and check in with us next week on MakerGalaxy.
A production of EBD Media.